Here we are now on the turret of the Chieftain main battle tank. Now obviously the Chieftain is very dear to my heart purely because it was the first tank that I ever trained on, and my first ever job in the Royal Armoured Corps was as a Chieftain driver. The Chieftain itself obviously came with a crew of 4. It saw service from the 1960s to around about the 1990s. Weighing in about 55 tonnes and a top speed of around about 30 miles an hour, it was without doubt one of the first true main battle tanks. Starting off at the front of the Chieftain then, and some of the main parts. First of all, we've got the glacis plate. Located on either side of the glacis plate, we have the headlights, and next to each one of the headlights, we have the IR lights as well. Also, you'll notice that quite unusual for any tank design, we also had side lights. Backwards, we can see quite clearly we've got the driver's position, i.e. the driver's hatch, and also the periscope assembly, so we can actually drive either opened up or enclosed fully down as well. Directly above him, you can see the gun bellows and the mantlet, and located, coaxially mounted on there, was the coaxially mounted machine gun. The main armament. Well, the main armament, obviously on Chieftain, was a 120mm rifled gun. And you can see there, we've got a thermal sleeve surrounding it, passing all the way down. You have various clamps that secure the thermal sleeve in place until we get to the fume extractor. And finally, if we carry on all the way down, it finishes at the end with the muzzle of the gun and also the muzzle reference system and the shroud above it. Now we're going to deal with, in a bit more detail, the turret of the Chieftain. At the moment, just in front of me, you can see the MBC compartment. Directly in front of the MBC compartment, we have the Metadyne access cover. And just to the left of the Metadyne access cover, we have the turret batteries. Directly in front of the turret batteries, you can see it was just a stalk where we used to put the flashing light if we had to do a road move, for example. And the first of our antenna bases just next to that. There are various stowage bins on the Chieftain, and I'll explain some of those in a bit more detail. The one you can see just to your left there could be used for anything, but most crews tended to put things like the cooking equipment in there. In this location here, we have the loader's hatch, or the operator's hatch. Again, this was a spring-loaded hatch, which used to break on quite a frequent basis. And to the right of that, obviously, we have the commander's cupola. Now, the commander's cupola on Chieftain was unable to be actually moved independently, and we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail when we get inside. Also, the commander's hatch, again, had various positions, so it could be fully open like it is now, the midway position, it could also be in the umbrella position, or it could, of course, be fully shut. Directly in front, you can see the outside, or the episcopes of where the commander's sight was, and again, that had its own individual washer and wiper system. And just to the left of that is where you would find the commander's GPMG, the general purpose machine gun. On the Chieftain, there was the ability for the commander to fire the GPMG from actually inside his cupola. And just to the left of that, there's a stowage box there where you can put a box of 200 rounds of ammunition. More stowage bins just to the right. It became fondly known as the commander's bin because that tended to be where the commander put all his equipment into. And beneath that is another basket. Again, we tended to, as a crew, put the camouflage net in this one. Although not fitted on here at the moment, you can see the spool or the reel there. That's where the Don 10 used to go. Just to the left of the loader's position, we can see the armoured hood there, which housed the thermal sight. Also on the loader's position, although not fantastic, we also had a rotational sight for the loader himself, so we could see very small field of view from inside the turret when he's fully closed down. Directly in front of the commander's cupola was the gunner's sight, the gunner's main sights with an armoured ballistic cover. The gunner's main sight also had its own washer and wiper system. And just to the left of that was the armoured hood cover for the gunner's auxiliary sights. Again, more of that when we get inside the turret. If we move forward, we've also got a lifting eye. This was one of the eyes that was moved if, God forbid, you had to actually lift the turret for reasons of maintenance. And finally, on the left and right of the turret are the multi-barreled smoke grenade dischargers. And we'll see the control for activating those again when we get inside the turret. Okay, quickly looking then at the Chieftain suspension. First thing you notice is the track idler located to the front. At the moment, this particular one then, obviously most of it, and we've got 3 return rollers on there located just underneath the tracks, is covered by the bazooka or glacis plates. And notice that unlike some that we'll see later on, they've got the foliage hooks attached to the glacis plates. Just a quick closer look at the Chieftain suspension pack there. This one's great, it's actually off. A couple of things we want to point out. Obviously the top rollers there, which we pointed out on the actual vehicle. Some of the road wheel hubs, and you can see the locking wheel nuts on there. And also, a thing which was an absolute nightmare for the drivers to change was the spring packs. The spring packs are compressed in there and found behind. But obviously it was the driver's worst nightmare was trying to change one of those. There are a total of 6 road wheels, and finally, located to the rear, we find the drive sprocket. One of the things to note on the drive sprocket, although slightly dirty at the moment, is one of the indicator indentations. This was just an indication of when the teeth of the sprocket would worn down. When it gets near to that indentation, it just means that the sprocket really does need changing. Let's now look at the back of the Chieftain. First of all, you find one of the 2 tow hooks, one on either side. We've also got the rear indicators, of course, and the rear lenses. Stowage position for the first aid kit, and one of 2 stowage bins that you'd find on the back of a Chieftain. Usually found in here some of the driver's tools. One of the exhausts, and on the back we've got 2 rear towing hooks as well. Also in the centre we've got the convoy light, and all the convoy light was a means that if tanks were following each other, we could have all the lights turned off and they could still follow the tank in front of them. Directly above that we've got the gun crutch, at the moment in the stow position, and to the left of the gun crutch we have the tank telephone. This was just the means that the infantry could talk when they were to the rear of the tank. Okay, and now we're inside the Chieftain and we're going to look at each of the crew stations in turn. First of all, of course, I'm sat now in the commander's seat. The commander's seat hydraulically operated, so of course when we are travelling with the hatch open, the commander could actually jack the seat up and see outside. A few of the main controls, obviously very apparent directly in front of you is the commander's sight, binocular type sight. Just to the left of that is the elevation hand wheel for the commander's GPMG. There's the ability to elevate and obviously depress, and also with a locking device on there as well. Vision blocks located all the way around, and just to the right, probably the most important thing for the commander's station is the commander's control and monitoring unit. This is the computer that actually works out all the ballistic calculations, etc. when you do fire the main armament. Direct to the front and left of the commander's side is the commander's fire control box, and on the commander's fire control box we've got the commander's control. The ability to select between coax and main armament, the firing switch, the red bakelite firing switch. Also, there is a rocker switch. Push it up for lays and down for auto-lay. And again, you won't be able to see it from where you are at the moment, but just to the top right-hand corner of that, there is a push-button selector type switch which can select between the different natures of ammunition. Just behind the commander, you have the power supply unit, and you also have the control cubicle for the gun control equipment. Directly behind that is the control panel. Again, this deals with the gun control equipment. And just to the left of the commander's control and monitoring unit was the Traverse hand wheel. This enables the commander to move the cupola left and right. And finally, really, in the commander's station, you've got the commander's grip switch. On pushing that in, it enabled the commander then to have complete control and override the gunner for powered traverse, left, right, and also elevation and depression by means of the toggle switch. Let's now move down into the gunner station and have a look at some of the main controls that he's got. The first thing then, obviously, the most important part of the gunner station is the sight laser rangefinder. This particular one was the number 6 Mark I. A few key things on there. You have the graphical adjusters and also, again, a binocular vision. There would be a brow pad actually located on there. To the right of that, the various controls that the gunner's got available to him. The Metadyne controls. The Metadynes were what actually powered the powered traverse on Chieftain. And to the right of that, we saw outside the multi-barrel smoke grenade dischargers. This is the ability then that the gunner's got to fire those. So left and right banks for the multi-barrel smoke grenade discharges. Moving down below that, various control panels. The more important ones really on here were the gunner's lighting and control box. Various things on here that you can control, the eyepiece heater, for example, the window wipers, and the gunner's IR sights, and also a few dimmer switches. Moving forwards, like the commander's got a grip switch for using the powered traverse, the gunner's got exactly the same thing, but remember, of course, the commander has the ability to override it. And to the left, between the gunner's legs, was the gunner's fire control handle. Again, if you see on here, the ability underneath the rocker switch to select either coax or main armament. The rocker switch just to the right of that, which enable us to lays or auto-lay. And on the bottom right, the push button select switch, which enabled the gunner to select the different natures of ammunition. Located just to the left of that, although it's tied up at the moment, is the elevation hand wheel. And all that would enable the gunner to do was manually elevate or depress the main armament. Across to the right, Again, a manual ability for the gunner to traverse left and right, and this is located on the turret traverse gearbox. And finally, really, in the gunner station, you've got the gunner's auxiliary sight. You saw the access hatch from the outside, and this is just a very, very primitive means where the gunner can actually, if needs be, and the main sight goes down, still fire the main armament using the gunner's auxiliary sight. Okay, now I've moved across to the loader's position there, and you can see again, like some of the vehicles we've already come in, although not particularly roomy, it's actually a lot better than some. Moving around at some of the key details in here, you obviously see there's an awful lot of stowage inside the Chieftain. The various things, the bag charge containers, extremely useful for keeping bearings, we use it on exercise sometimes. And also some of the main armament rounds. What we've got in here at the moment, you can see is some of the inert rounds, for example, the Hesh, etc. This particular Chieftain is fitted with the VRC 353, and there was the ability to put up there in the stowage rack two VRC 3s next to each other. And also, although not in the correct stowage position at the moment, you can see quite clearly here the boiling vessel, the single most important thing, obviously, for the British Army, which enabled them to make hot water. Moving our way around, one of the incredibly important things for the loader was the loader's safety switch. Safe and the live position. The safe position, what it does is it means that there was no powered traverse enabled to the turret. You can see various stowage positions located all the way around here, and also another important control panel was the NBC, the Nuclear, Biological and Chemical Control Panel. And this is the means by which the loader controls the vents located on the NBC pack, which you looked at when we were on the outside. And finally, really, to the front left of the turret in the Chieftain, you've got the stowage rack for the 7.62mm machine gun ammunition located there. And this would be unboxed, linked up and fed directly up the feed chute into this position here, which is where the 7.62mm machine gun would have been mounted. Some of the other important things then on the breech: the replenisher and the replenisher telltale rod, which is bad news at the moment because we can't actually pull it out at all. The stop running back, all this enabled to do was it meant that the breech couldn't actually run back if it wasn't, so for a safety means, again, to stop the breech from running back. And the actual breech assembly itself. Again, another critical thing for the loader was the loader's firing guard. The loader's firing guard enabled and meant that when the gun was actually firing, because the gun and the recoil of the gun, the breech would come back quite a long way, obviously incredibly dangerous if the loader was anywhere else. So unless the loader's firing guard was made and the micro switch was activated, it meant that the main armament couldn't be fired. And finally, across the left here, you've got the BML, or the breech mechanism lever. This is the means that actually opens the breech, and also the breech closing lever.